Hey, and welcome. I'm so excited to invite you to this episode because this is something we've talked a lot about. I have just saw a post recently in a Facebook post from a homeschool mama that was just starting out, and she was saying, I really am concerned about socialization. Now, I know this is probably something you're like, I don't know. Is this something I really care about? Because my kids have been homeschooling for a while and I think they're fine. But I want you to listen into this because this is something that could really affect the way that you think about socialization in the future for each stage of your kid's life. Now, we have different stages that we go through for littles, for middle ages, and for teens. And I want to address all of those today because they're all about the same idea of socialization in the definition that we give it. And I think a lot of us, especially those of us who come from public school or private school to homeschool, we have an idea about socialization in that way. It actually is totally not realistic in that it's not how the real world works. So, the way that we see socialization, and when your mother in law asks you, well, what about their socialization? Or maybe it's your spouse saying, I don't know, I want to make sure they're not going to be weird and socialized. This is not just for new homeschoolers, this is for us too, as veteran homeschoolers. Because, like I said, we're going to talk about how this affects each stage of our kids' life. When we're thinking about socialization, we need to make sure that it is the definition that's really the definition that the real world uses, not the definition the public school uses. The public school and private school and just institutional school definition means that they're around kids of the same age or about the same age for how many hours they're in school. What is it? Like 6 to 8 to 9 hours a day. And they are trapped with a bunch of them, a lot of them in a small area. And what I mean, I really mean trapped. It was funny. We were just traveling up in the Northern California redwoods this last week, and I was remarking how these schools up there didn't have fences around some of them. They didn't have this caged in thing like us in the lower part, the San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California area, have these schools that are caged in literally. And you're stuck in this cage with all of these kids about the same age. And that to us who've been to public school, that is socialization. Now, that's not actually a real social environment. When does that happen ever again in life? Never. It never happens again. I always say that's a manufactured social construct. It is not real. It's not how real life works. And I want you to consider that when you're thinking about homeschooling and when you're thinking about how you are preparing your social environment for your kids. So let's get with the definition first. I want to give you the real definition of socialization that's going to take the stress right off you. And wherever you're at in your homeschool journey, whether you're just starting out or whether you've been homeschooling for a while, I want you to think about this definition of socialization. And I want you to think about how you are using that in your life, in your homeschool life, and how you can use it more. Maybe you're putting pressure on yourself, on your kids, on your schedule to make this false socialization definition a real thing when it's not actually the true definition. So think about that, okay? So the real definition of socialization is the ability to communicate with and have relationships with people of all ages. Let me say that again. Socialization is the ability to communicate with and have relationships with people of all ages. Isn't that real life? When you go to the grocery store, when you go to work, when you go to when you go to the park, when you go anywhere, you are You are socializing with people of all ages. That includes people younger than you, people older than you, people your same age. It's not, yes, there is a space for having people your same age, but it's not a forced thing that we don't need to force all the time. I'm going to share with you about that as we go through the different stages of your kids' lives. Okay, so I really want you to think about that specific definition. Socialization is the ability to communicate with and have relationships with people of all ages. This idea of socialization, I'm bringing it up because we don't hear about it a lot anymore. There's so many homeschool communities, and you think it's not something you need. And we think, oh, I got it down. But are you doing it in a way that is similar to school? Are you trying to make it that way? Or are you trying to really define the definition as in real life definition? Okay. So we're going to look at this in the ages, your kids' stages of life, okay? So the little kids ages, and I would say little kids is from like 0 to around maybe first, second grade-ish. And littles, the fear for us is the most that we need to have them around kids their own age. That is the biggest fear for us. I know when we moved into our town that we live in now, Kenyon was 9 months old, and I really wanted to join a mom's group. I wanted to join a not a homeschool group. We didn't have homeschool groups up here at the time, but I wanted to join a mom's club just to have the socialization part. And honestly, it wasn't as much for him as it was for me, but for him too, that pressure was real. And I hear that all the time, especially from moms with littles. Oh, we got to make sure he's around kids of all ages. We got to make sure she's socialized. And yes, there is a place for that, but it's not a priority at this age because you're not keeping your kids in a bubble, are you? If you're listening to this, I know you're not. You're not keeping your kids in a bubble. You are having them in the world. You're doing things. You're going to the park, meeting a friend. You're doing stuff. You're going to the grocery store. You're living your life. You're hanging out with family friends, and even though they might not be the same age kids, they'll still communicate. And also, it's great for them to be around kids and adults of all ages and know how to behave, know how to act, know how to communicate with people of all ages. Right? Have conversations with people of all ages. I always say, a homeschooler that's been homeschooling for a long time, a kid who's been homeschooling for a long time, because they'll look you dead in the eye, even as a little kid. They'll look you dead in the eye and they'll talk to you like you were just some friend of theirs that was the same age. I've seen it with my own son when he was little at the grocery store. The checker would ask him a question, and he just blah 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 blah. And he would just talk the whole time and look him dead in the eye. It was the greatest thing, and they were like, "Wow, this is amazing!" Because kids in public school are used to having their heads down. They're used to trying to keep personal space because they don't have any at school, and there's all this negativity. When you live in the world as the world is your place to meet people of any age, it is a beautiful thing, and your kids learn to do that. So, as littles, first of all, take the stress off. This is actually the place where you don't need as much deliberate same age socialization. Sure, they have a friend, they have a cousin, something like that, a neighbor, next door that they can play with. Great. It's not a gigantic priority because you're not keeping them in a bubble. Like I said, you're interacting in the world and you're teaching them how to communicate and have relationships with people of all ages. Also, don't discount what's happening in your home. I want to really reiterate that because it is something that's very important that most people don't think about. You have siblings, you have uncles and aunts, you have grandparents, you have your spouse and yourself, dad and mom, you have neighbors. You have lots of people in your life. Don't discount what's happening there. It's very important to their overall socialization. Now, if you want to have a kid that's a friend or two, fine. That makes sense, sure. But it's not a priority for their entire life, success. They're going to be socialized. It's fine. You can take that pressure off. The second level is the middle ages, kind of like I would say between third grade and like seventh, seventh grade ish. That is really when we're thinking about the quality of the relationships. This is where in school they would be having a lot of bullying, they would have a lot of negativity. They're trying to figure out everybody's got hormones going. They're trying to figure out how they fit in the world and then they're smashed in with all these people. It's not about checking the box, do we have friends? And none of this is. None of this is. You know me about checking boxes. I'm not about just checking boxes to check boxes. It's not about just do we have friends. It's thinking about who are we raising. Have you heard that before from me a couple of times? It's thinking about who we're raising. So think about your end goal. Think about that 25-year-old when he or she grows up and there's 20 at 25, what kind of socialization do you want them to have? Do you want to have the million friends their age? Or do you want them to be able to actually have a relationship with? And I don't mean romantically necessarily, I mean have friendships, have relationships with people of all ages, because that's how the real world works, right? So think about that when they're in the middle ages. The pressure is high for us to have as many friends as possible. And we want to think about not just checking a box, want to think about do they have friends who are giving them opportunities to practice communication, to practice relationships, that kind of thing. We're really, these days have you seen your kids on the phone? Have they actually used the phone with a friend? Because isn't it funny they don't know how to talk on the phone? We talk about this all the time. My homeschool friends and I, we're like, these kids literally don't know how to talk on the phone. We have to train them to talk to each other and to respond to each other and say something and acknowledge each other and then say something back without arguing, fighting, and those kinds of things. And then when we do argue and fight, how do we resolve that in a respectful, manageable way, tactful way that preserves the self-image of the person, right? That's what we want. So this is where quality relationships really comes in handy, okay? Quality, not quantity. You're going to hear that a lot from me throughout this because quality, not quantity is very important. Who are we trying to raise? Do they have opportunities to do that? And that's not just with kids their own age. Remember, they're doing that with their dad, they're doing that with their uncle, they're doing that with their cousins. It's all really about being able to communicate and then how to resolve conflicts, right? The middle years are a little bit weird, but yeah, having quality over quantity is really something to think about. Now, when we hit the teen years, and I'm here, I'm feeling it right now. I didn't actually feel pressure for the friends thing. Maybe I did a little bit in the beginning with littles for sure. Definitely. That's why I want to join the Moms Club. But and we were very active in the Moms Club actually for a really long time. I was the president for a while. I was on the board for several years. We had play groups, lots of play groups, and we did activities. It was really fun. And that was a lot for me too because those were my friends. Those people became my friends too. But in the teen years, I'm feeling a different kind of pressure. And you might be feeling this kind of pressure. The teen years, I hear it from homeschool parents a lot that my teens don't have friends, or it's hard for the teens to find friends. Now, there are homeschool communities virtually everywhere, so you can find something somewhere. However, for us moms of teens, I should say, It's a little trickier because our schedules are so impacted. So our kids are doing more, they're really into their activities, whatever they're doing. For us, it's scouts and kaji kembo, martial arts. And there's also a little community that we've built too of close friends and homeschool community there. But it's we're finding it harder to connect because the time we're so impacted with their studies and then their activities. Where do we find time for that unless their friends are involved in those things? And for us, they're not necessarily all the time. Sometimes we do classes with them, but most of the time they're not. So we have to think about finding time to spend time with friends, and that impacts us as parents because when we're going and we're having friend time too because it's the mom friends, but we really do have to find that time and make time for that, and it can be a struggle. A lot of times the of teens or the teens and the moms of teens kind of separate. They kind of just distance because it's just normal with our busy schedules. Teens are busy, man. Teens are very busy. And so to find a few friends where they can really connect with is really important because at this stage, it's not at all about quantity. It is very much about quality. Teens have deeper connections. They want deeper connections. They want friends who are into the same things. They want to talk with their friends, share music with their friends. They want to do things together, and they have deeper relationships that they crave, but they also have deeper conflicts. And the conflicts are more complicated. And we want to help them through that and help teach them and mentor them through the process. But we can't do that with a large group of people and we just can't find time for it. So making time for just a few friends is really powerful and something I think that a lot of us need to think about definitely with the overall who are we raising mentality. So, who are we trying to raise? Making sure that they get the skills that they need. And that comes from deep quality relationships. And also, we want to be making sure that they have friends that are people that are serving them. They're serving each other. It's a give and take relationship, and that somebody that's going to feed them, right? Somebody who they're going to benefit from that relationship and it's not going to be a toxic relationship. We want to get them away from those at all ages, right? That's something we know as mamas. But what I want you to understand about the teen age is really depth of relationships is important here. And then making just a few friends that are really, really something where they can test out their skills, their communication skills, and learn through that and their conflict resolution skills. So that's the teen age. Remember, it's really about socialization overall. What is the definition? It is communication and relationships with people of all ages. That's the ultimate goal. That's what life is really like. And for all ages, littles, middle ages, and teens, this is something that we need to keep in mind. Quality over quantity, always. Always. And that goes for us too. I mean, as we get older, sometimes it's like we have less friends, but they're deeper, right? I mean, that's just how life is. So we're doing different things, and some friends come in for a season and whatever they need to do, and then they're out for a season. But it's it's just life. We're just living life and we're teaching our kids the skills that they need to be successful in their future life and as adults because we're raising adults, we're not raising kids, right? And they're not your littles are not going to not get socialized if they're not around a bunch of kids their same age. Just remember that, okay? Just skip the guilt. I want you to just focus on what the real definition is and focus on that end goal. Keeping that in mind is very, very important. And then making sure that connection doesn't have to always be the same age. Our kids at homeschool, they can be several different years apart and still have the same connection. You know, something that I find is often true with homeschoolers is that they connect on a maturity level and an interest level, not necessarily a an age level. So my 17-year-old can connect with a 15-year-old on the same age things if they're around the same maturity level. Sometimes it's not necessarily exactly the same maturity level, but if they have the same interest, they can get along just fine. So, I mean, Kenyon gets along just fine with anybody, but it's he relates better to kids who have the same, obviously, the same interests and similar maturity levels. So, that's really what we're looking for. And it's not that hard to do today and this day and age. You just find a couple of people that you can create deep relationships with and lasting relationships, and you're good to go. You promise your kids are not going to be, and they're not going to be ruined for life. And whether you are a new homeschooler or a veteran homeschooler, all of this applies to you. And just reevaluate where you are and what your motivation for socialization has been thus far, and then think about the new this real definition, the new definition I just gave you, and think about what you've been doing in terms of that definition. What I'm doing on August 4th has a lot to do with tips like this, and has a lot to do with how you can make real changes and real connections with not only your kids, but also yourself. On August 4th, I am doing the Inspired Homeschool Summit. This is our second summit of this kind, and we have a whole new group of 10 speakers plus me. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things from neurodivergence to health. We're talking about college, test prep, and applications. We're going to be talking about writing. We're going to be talking about gosh, a whole lot of things. We're also going to be talking about vocabulary and getting your kids to use more vocabulary. That's going to be fun. So we have so many things for you guys, so many things. I want to make sure that you are there. This is a free event. It's one day live only. Well, you can purchase the replay, but I want you there live because we have such an amazing time. And you're going to get so much more out of being there live and connecting with people in the chat and connecting with the speakers than you will on watching a replay. Replay is passive. Being there live is key. So make sure you grab the link in the show notes in wherever you're watching or listening to this. I'm going to drop it below and you will be able to register for that for August 4th. We only have 5 days left. It's happening in 5 days. So it's totally free. Make sure you're there and bring some of your friends too. This is a great way for you guys to get on the same page about some of the things that are happening in your homeschool or that you want to happen. A great way to think about how to increase motivation. That's what I'm going to be talking about. And how to get your kids to be independent and self directed. What are you talking about? This is crazy. All right. I will see you on August 4th, and let's talk more next week. Bye bye.